All right, well, it is that time. Good evening. My name is Alicia Yokoyama, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's third Tuesday author series, which is generously sponsored by the Friends of the Lake Oswego Public Library. The Friends of the Lake Oswego Public Library is a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing enhanced support for library projects of community interest. We'd love for you to know more about the Friends and the great programs they support, such as the Summer Library Challenge, which will be starting June 1st, so be sure to sign up, music and author events, monthly trivia nights, and the fabulous Lake Oswego Reads program. Visit the Friends website to learn more about their work, including the book to use bookstores and how you can join in supporting the library. Now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's author, Dian Greenwood. The mother of two adult sons, Dian fulfilled a lifelong dream when she published her first novel at age 81. Her debut novel, About the Carlton Sisters, and her upcoming novel, Forever Blackbirds, revolve around the process of women finding agency in order to live their best lives. Her theme for tonight's presentation is, It's Never Too Late. Please give a warm welcome to Dian Greenwood.
Wow. Thank you so much. I think what I'm going to do is just chat for a few minutes until I get warmed up. So I wrote my first poem when I was 14. And the minute I finished that poem, of course it was a love poem to a boy, right? I knew I wanted to write, that was my life passion. So I started college and majored in literature and English. And then life happened, Fell in love, got married, 2 kids, many, many years. But I kept writing. In my early 30s, I started back to college again. And I majored in creative writing at San Francisco State University. And at that time, I was majoring in poetry writing. And my favorite teacher was Stan Rice, who was famous as the husband of Anne Rice. So we were all there together in the 70s. And it was a big time in San Francisco. So fast forward, I've had a long career as a marriage and family therapist. I'm still working. And but in about 1991, I made the decision to not pursue a PhD because I knew it would take about 10 years, the length of time it takes to write a novel. So I have been writing steadily since I was in my early 30s. And after frustrating experiences with an agent, with small book publishers, in 1979, as I was getting closer to 80, my son kept saying to me, "If not now, when, Mom?" And so that became the mantra. And I knew about this hybrid publisher named She Writes Press. So I submitted About the Carlton Sisters to them, and they were excited about the novel. And it came out in 2023, middle of June, so not quite a year ago. But in the time that I had been writing, I had also written 3 other novels. So Forever Blackbirds just came out earlier this month. The sequel, Safekeeping, will come out in 25. And the novel that's really, really close to my heart because it really deals with this time of life is a novel called Bert and Eileen. And it's a story about an aging couple dealing with death, dealing with the acrimony of adult children who think that the mother can't handle her finances and they want to take over her life. And this woman who has always been very traditional gets her back up. So that novel hopefully will come out in 26, God willing, and I live that long. So today I'm 82. And, I told a physician of mine not too long ago, you have to keep me healthy because I love my life and I love writing. And a month ago, I started a new project. So it just goes on and on. Tonight, we're here really to celebrate about the Carlton sisters. And this novel's been out for a while. This novel involves three sisters in their early, right around the cusp of 50. And they have been estranged from each other since they were in their adolescence. And their father strangely disappeared without a word and left their mother depressed and bereft and having to strike out on her own to support these daughters. Lorraine is the eldest. She is the responsible one, of course. And her sister Julie, who is just a little over a year younger than her, ran off to Las Vegas to become a showgirl. And it was actually a recourse because Julie had always wanted to do ballet in New York. But she was too tall, and her dance teacher told her her tits were too big. Becky, the youngest one, was the one most affected by the father's disappearance. And she ran off at 16 and married her high school sweetheart, dropped out of school, and ended up a victim of alcoholism. So these are three sisters who are now called in, I've got it coughed up, called into reluctant reunion with, by their mother, who is dying of breast cancer. So Lorraine lives in a double-wide trailer in this little town called River's End, and the sisters all kind of land there. So I thought what I'd do is just read briefly tonight from the opening to, there's a little preface in this book that shows you the girls when they were young and how they interacted with each other. But this is chapter 1. Each chapter, moving the story forward, is told by a different sister. So this is Lorraine, and I may need to get my other glasses. I never know if these work better or not. Lunch and dinner specials don't go on the chalkboard until I put them there. My best cursive, if I do say so myself, and I always took a certain pride when I'd finished, standing back and admiring the way I looped my C's and D's. That Friday, near the end of June, the fuzzy season in the almond orchards, as my sisters always called them, I wrote meatloaf and tuna casserole and chicken fried steak on the board in green chalk. The truckers would squawk for T-bones, but in the end, they'd eat anything hot and fast to fill their gullets before heading up the pass and over the grapevine to L.A. I pulled my apron off the hook, Lorraine in red cursive across the top. But everyone called me Laney, especially the truckers. Maybe it sounded friendlier than I am, to tell the truth. Alma, our overflow waitress, was late. One of her 6 kids had busted his leg. There's always something going wrong with one of them. Breeders, my sister Julie calls them. That would be Alma, also Pastor Harmon's Pamela, and Diego's nutty wife, all breeders. By 10:30, my armpits were sweat up to my pleated hanky, and I hadn't had time to pee since I came on shift at 6. having agreed to work breakfast and dinner until closing at 10. The Manteca Lathrop Rodeo, likely the biggest tips of the year. Alma finally arrived with her too fine, too long hair in a net. She worked the counter where we had the fastest turnover. Outside of day-long breakfast, only tuna casserole and meatloaf were left on the chalkboard, and we still had the whole day ahead of us. In the kitchen, Diego shouted orders in Spanish, his usual late morning conniption fit. Plus, Jose Luis was behind on dishes. I worked the 4 booths at the side opposite the counter where the biggest orders came in. The drivers had bunched up so they could jaw with each other, while an elderly couple leaned over their coffee near the window facing the highway. "Just pie and coffee," they said, from the best booth. Below the old lady's wrinkly neck, a single strand of fake pearls hung on the gray sweater that marked her hair. Nobody with real pearls came into Diego's, especially on a Cowboy Friday. She skipped the ice cream on her pie and then ordered extra cream for her coffee. The 6 containers in front of her wouldn't do. She kept asking me to bring more. Folks like that never leave a tip. I just wanted the day to be done, to be sitting on my bed cross-legged with my tips spread around me, unfolding the bills and counting them as soon as I put Mama to bed. "Take care of yourself first, girl," Mama always said, something I never learned to do. What she didn't say was, "After you take care of me." In the kitchen, I could only see the back of Diego's hat, but someone in the diner heard him shout, "Somebody left the damn door open." In the same moment I turned toward the front screen door, some woman in a yellow cowboy hat passed the cash register and headed for the only empty booth in the back. Never mind, there were folks by the door waiting to be seated. Something about her, maybe the way she lurched, caught my eye and marked her as trouble. But I was too busy to do more than glance in her direction. She'd have to wait. My hands were full. I was lifting pie onto 2 plates when someone behind me stepped in front of, tapped me on the shoulder, right on my cutting arm, with the knife poised and ready to cut. "Don't touch me. I've got a knife. Understand?" Short and skinny Luis stepped back, looking at the knife like he was next. He pointed to the back booth. "That lady," Jose said. "I think she just threw up." Jesus help me. That was the last straw. "Get a bucket, Jose, with Clorox." Already the stench. God almighty, the stench. The woman's face and hat lay in a pool of puke. She'd already passed out. Her face pointed toward the window. I lifted the cowboy hat off her head, and chunks of vomit fell onto the table. Jose stood behind me, looking stupid with a mop in his hand and the Clorox bucket on the floor. I took a rag from him and started to wipe the mess now pooled on the table. When I lifted her head, what I saw under that yellow hat and red hair was my sister Becky's passed out face. Lord God have mercy. I didn't know whether to smash her head into the table or yield to hysteria. So this book took me all of 25 years to write. I started it in 1998, and then in 1999 I began to study with Janet Fitch in Los Angeles. Janet wrote White Oleander, which is now kind of ancient and was made into a movie. And then I moved back to my home in Oregon in late 1999. And in 2002, I began to study in Portland with a man named Tom Spanbauer, who ran a writing workshop called Dangerous Writers. And I was with them for 7 years. So I had written other novels before this, but they were all learner novels. And this, in a way, was kind of a learner novel. That's why it took so long. And then I put it away in about 2008, and I started the book that's on the back counter, which is Forever Blackbirds. And that was started at a family memorial service where the family sat around and told all the stories nobody had ever told in the family, all the family secrets. And I went home, I wrote 3 pages, and a month later, I went to my son's cabin and came home with 87. So that was when that novel started. So why don't we leave these sisters here for a minute, and I'll take any questions that you might have, and then maybe I'll read a tiny bit from the new novel. Yes.
Since you've been writing for so long, at what point, like, what was the impetus for you to finally say, like, I'm going to pursue this to get published? Like, how did you make that transition from something being a habit you were doing, maybe small publishers, to really making the next
Yeah.
leap?
Well, I had published poetry and short stories, and in 2013, I was in Seattle at a writers' conference, and I secured an agent. And she was crazy about this novel. So she had me rewrite a couple of chapters, and then she tried to sell it in New York, she said. I chose her, and she chose me because she was a woman of a certain age. But she was unable to sell the novel because I was an unknown person. Today, even well-known authors are having trouble selling their novels. It's all about money. This is all a commercial endeavor. You know, when you move from writing the novel is one thing, publishing it is something else. So then she said, why don't you try small presses? And I did that for 3 or 4 years. And then small presses are usually run by 1 or 2 people. They don't answer you. You send them a query. You never hear from them. If you send them pages, you never get the pages back. So I just put everything aside because I had already been working on the sequel to Blackbirds, and I had also started Bert and Eileen. So I just kept writing. So what finally happened was, as I was turning 79, I told you, if not now, when? And I think one of the things I love so much about talking to groups is don't give up. Don't ever give up. And for a long time, I felt kind of victimized by the cultural ideas about age and aging. And once I could get past that, I said, you know, I've lived a long time. I've had a lot of life experience, and I know a few things. And so, I don't know if that answers your question. I lose the question when I get started. Yes.
It sounds like you have at least 3 books, if not more. You started with the Carlton sisters.
Mhm.
At what point did you transition to another book? Do you skip back and forth in your writing?
Actually, I go as far as I can go. I've been part of writing groups all of these years until the pandemic hit. And about 4 years ago, I had the good fortune, 4 or 5 years ago, of going to, a friend talked me into this writing group where I was working on essays, which there are essays on my website. And the woman who was leading the workshop, her book will be at Powell's in Cedar Hills this Thursday, Susie Vitello. And she's a developmental editor. She has worked on every one of my novels. And what a developmental editor does is they look for the arc to make sure you have a full story. And, and then she sends back 9 pages of single-spaced writing and the manuscript all marked up, and you go to work. So to answer your question, I tended to go back and forth. As a consequence, I never got too frustrated. And I am one of the writers who loves to write. Not every writer loves to write. Yes. Well, they do. Yeah. Well, if anyone here is familiar with Carl Jung's psychology and the concept of archetypes, for me, I feel like these characters are living inside me all the time, and they're just waiting for a door to go through. So even though I put the sisters away and I was frustrated, I believe in always writing on a new project. And so sometimes they would overlap, but not so much that it became confusing. And those characters, I don't know where they come from. They're just there. Yeah, people ask me, because I have 3 sisters, and they say, "Are these your sisters?" And I say, "No, none of them are." Some of the emotional landscape is probably what is in the subtext, but these are not my sisters. Yes. No, no. When I learned to write in scenes. So what I just read to you was really a scene. It was an incident that takes place in a diner, and then as you could hear, she's anxious to get back home. You have an idea of what her home life is, but then that's just the beginning of the chapter. So the chapter is made up of 2 or 3 scenes. And I write scene by scene. No, I don't submit to the developmental editor until I feel I have a finished draft. So it takes a long time. And I'm what they call a pantser. I write by the seat of my pants. I don't have an outline. I have the character. And the character tells me the story.
Do you hire the developmental editor?
Yes.
So do you hire people along the way to
Yes. Yes. This is not a business where you make a lot of money. This is a business where you hope you have enough money in the bank to pay your assistant at the end of the month. I think that was the other thing that stopped me, was the craze about social media. And I don't know about all of you, but I'm one of those people who's very averse to social media. So I was very lucky 2 years ago to have a friend introduce me to a young woman, very smart, mid-20s. That is not foreign territory for her. She does a whole social media campaign for me and a lot more. Yes.
You mentioned that you were still working as a therapist, so I'm just curious about your writing discipline. You get up at a certain time, and you say, this is the hours I have to go
Yeah. Yeah, no, if I wrote from inspiration, I wouldn't have accomplished nearly what I have. But I live alone. That makes it very easy. I always write first thing in the morning. I have been an obsessive journal writer for 50 some years. And so I often go from my journal into my work. Or I pick up my work after I have to deal with a couple of emails or something. But because I live alone, I can have early dinner and go back to my desk. And so there's no, I think most people are really curious about what your writing practice is. And mine is, I have to say, pretty haphazard. But I'm always writing. Yeah. Yes.
I noticed in that introduction you read for us, you say it like it is in there. You use different phrases and words that people use that don't often use in your books. And is that somewhat like your normal or natural personality?
I think it is my natural personality. I grew up in western South Dakota. And this is farm and ranch country. These people are masters of practicality. They don't have any time for nuance or anything else. And so I know that all of that language from growing up in that country, this novel about the Carleton sisters is located in central California. I love that country. I love the wide open space. I love everything about it. And I wanted to write about farm country because that's something I know something about. The new novel, Forever Blackbirds, is located in central North Dakota. It's really my grandmother's story, and used the skeleton of her story to write an immigrant novel. But location is really, really important. Bert and Eileen will be my first Portland novel. Yeah. Yes, Debbie.
How do you decide on a title? Does the title just come to you, or does your agent help you pick a title, or how do you find a title?
Oh, this was just a nightmare about the Carleton sisters. So I had 5 different titles, 5 different manuscripts under 5 different titles. And when it's getting ready to go to publishing, I just said, it's about sisters. Let's just call it what it is. As you said, the Carleton sisters. And then a poet friend of mine said, why not call it About the Carleton Sisters? And I think that about was the right choice. Forever Blackbirds came from another poet. I had a group of 8 or 9 friends, all Portland writers, and we used to go to a little town up in the mountains east of Ashland, to a little town called Lincoln. And we went to a retreat center up there every summer until the smoke got so bad from the fires we couldn't go. But it was sitting around the kitchen table one night, and my good friend Joanna Rose said, I think you should call this Forever Blackbirds. And it resonated with me because growing up in the plains, you were always aware of the blackbirds. And so that's how it became that. Yes.
I've had a chance to produce the first anthology of Forever Blackbirds, and I wanted to thank you for including that lovely Spokane poem.
Oh,
She's such a great reader, and it's so nice to see her references almost as you read them.
yeah.
I was wondering, from your practice as a poet to your practice as a fiction writer, what's the greatest craft strength you think you carry?
I think it's always reading my work out loud. To me, that's the best editing practice there is. Because My ear will pick up things that my eye won't pick up. And because I've been indoctrinated into the rhythm of language, it's very helpful. Also, when I was studying with Tom Spanbauer, he was very opposed to Latinates or really long words or big words in a novel. And so that had a big influence on me, too. In fact, a very dear friend of mine just published her novel, and it had so many complicated words in it that I was not going to go and look up, and I thought, is this necessary? So it's back to that plain speaking again. Yes. No, and I've been asked that before. It's a whole other venue that I haven't really explored. But more and more, as people age, they'd rather listen to things on Audible. And so, thank you for bringing that up, though. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. No, I think it's a really good question. And I was asked, a few years ago, before COVID, if I would record the story. But I hate to confess this, but my vocal cords are getting old. And so that means, that's why I have soda water up here. So I would have to, it's well placed though. I would have to find somebody who really understood the nuances of the novel to record it. Yes.
I find it interesting that you're both a therapist and a novelist,
Mm-hmm.
because I would both delve into the psyche of people, and I was just wondering where you see the bridges between those, where you draw when you're writing from your therapeutic practice or training, and vice versa.
Well, I try never to use anything that I hear from my clients. That's just kind of a hard and fast rule. But what I do hear that is part of every one of my novels is this kind of emotional landscape that we all have where we're trying to become our best selves. And so the novels are often written with roadblocks along the way. If you don't have drama, you don't have a novel. So I worked for 10 years in a psychiatric hospital. And I saw things there and worked with things that I've never written about and I probably never will. But I learned so much about love from the schizophrenics I worked with. And I think it made me a much better therapist. So if my clients would tell you, I'm a very plain-spoken therapist too. So yeah. So the bridge, you asked about the bridges. Yeah, I think it is that emotional landscape. We're all striving towards something. And as we go through life, we get disappointed. There's a line in Sisters where Lorraine is talking about her mother. And she says something to the effect, when you've lived your whole life with disappointment and regret, your daily comforts are all you really pay attention to. So, yeah. Any more questions? That's okay.
So, one reason we were so excited to come talk with you, you mentioned ageism, and as you entered into this field, is so we're both in our early 50s,
Mm-hmm.
and to be honest, there's not a lot of women
that's been pointed out to me quite a bit. And what I love is every once in a while somebody will say, it's really inspiring that you did this, that you keep going. And it's because I do what I love, you know. I love all my work. And that is a gift. Not everybody has that. I'm looking at the time, and if you would like, I can read a little bit from here, just from the beginning. This book, I used my grandmother's story as a skeleton, and it's told in what's called a dual timeline. And a dual timeline means there are two different stories happening at the same time. So I had this vision of writing three novels, 5 women in the same family in 5 different generations. So and then what I ended up doing, because frankly the immigrant story was too dark, so I ended up collapsing part of that into this novel. So there's the 1943 section, middle of World War II, and then there's the young girl, 14, escaping from Odessa, Russia, and the Bolsheviks with her family. So Marta, who is the heroine, is 45 in the beginning here. She was 14 on the ship. So I'll just read a little bit of each and of the 2 timelines, and then take more questions. Am I going too long? Okay. Albert was never a man to smile. As I watched him there in the alley, as I saw him standing over the incinerator, his eyes had that particular stare that sees but doesn't see. I thought it peculiar that he kept tearing pages from a book and feeding them to the fire, except for the momentary pauses when he gazed into the fire and smiled in a way I'd never seen. I still trusted him then. I still trusted him then, no reason not to, until I began to understand that the man standing before the incinerator kept tearing out and feeding Corinthians and Joseph, Matthew, and the Psalms, one page after another, into the flames. My Bibles. He was burning my Bibles. In that moment, some instinct begged me to check, to see if the Bible stack remained on the far end of the small newspaper stand next to the rocking chair, far enough from Albert's standing cigarette ashtray that he didn't have to see them, far enough that he couldn't complain. But even as I turned toward the parlor, I knew they were gone. The German Bibles and English Bibles, even a Russian Bible Mother brought in the bottom of the trunk across the Atlantic from Kassel. The New King James. All the notations I painstakingly wrote around favorable passages, dates recording the births and deaths of mother and father of Leo, my brother. The Bibles were always a source of tension between me and Albert, and could be blamed for every disagreement. Numb and horrified, I felt my mouth open, ready to scream, but nothing came out. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped toward the door as if to stop him. But as I focused on the many-colored beanie I'd knitted atop his still black hair, my throat closed with incredible disbelief. It was those momentary pauses when he warmed his hands at the fire and smiled, a smile that sickened, then steeled me, that told me that burning these books was his one great achievement. Yet even as I watched with horror, Father's voice whispered in my ear, "Never question your husband, Marta. A man has certain rights. He is not to be questioned." So that's the opening. Too true? So untrue. I know it's untrue. This is a lovely man willing to sit in the second row. So this is 1914, and I'll just read you a little bit. This is, they are just getting off the ferry and entering Ellis Island. 1914. In the blue light of early evening, the boards of the wooden gangplank creaked beneath my boots, mine and the tramp of all the other boots and sandals. This mass of bodies shoved each other in their effort to get onto the dock. All around me, immense feather beds were lashed with belts across the backs of men and older boys. Peasant women in babushkas gripped their babies against their chests and followed close behind the men, their children darting like loosed animals, threatening to dodge the precious bundle I carried in my arms, threatening to dislodge the precious bundle I carried in my arms. Old men with heavy jowls seemed bent in half from the weight of suitcases. A small child slept against a shoulder, while men as tall as father, some rounder, didn't seem to care who they trampled. I had to remain watchful to avoid being knocked one way or another. The screech of their voices and the cacophony had amplified the confusion. We were all too close, and after many occasions of saying, "Excuse me," I simply gave up. Hurrying toward Ellis Island's main hall, and just ahead of me, a girl my age, 14 or 15, cradled a large wicker basket, the clasp clearly broken, and the basket unraveling inside her folded arms. Her long chestnut hair was tied at her neck with a leather thong that threatened to come undone. She appeared to be alone and unprotected. Unthinkable for a girl like me, a girl who had always depended on my family to keep me safe, something I didn't have to think about before the Cossacks burned the barn. So I think that's enough of that. Yeah. Okay, any further questions? We've still got 15 minutes. Or you're welcome to get up out of your chairs. And there are some books on the back counter. There are 5 ARCs. Do you know what those are? Advanced reader copies that I am happy to sign and give away. You can still order the book about the Carleton sisters, hopefully in an independent bookstore, although it's on Amazon as well. And you're welcome to page through the new book about Forever Blackbirds. I left 2 copies on the back table. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you, Lake Oswego Library. This is a magnificent library. We love our libraries.
Thank you. Well, it was our pleasure having you, Diane. Thank you for being here. And thank you all for coming. Yeah, as Diane said, check out her books in the back, and please fill out a library survey for us as well. We appreciate you all, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions you all had.